Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Stephen Watson, and I have the privilege of being the president and CEO here at the National World War II Museum, and it is great to have you all here at the Higgins Hotel and Conference Center for our Band of Brothers 25th Anniversary Symposium, and I hope you enjoyed our first session and that you've enjoyed your time exploring our campus over the last couple days. Earlier this afternoon, I think many of you attended our first panel session focused on the technical aspects of Band of Brothers and how it portrayed the training and the combat of the series. And I just want to compliment Dr. Bell for leading a wonderful session to get us started here today. So thank you again, Mike. So throughout the program, we'll continue to reflect on the different aspects of this monumental series, which has done so much, as you all know, to ensure that the important history of World War II and those who fought in it is never forgotten. And of course, we're all gathered here this weekend, and we're proud to remember the men of the 506 Parachute Infantry Regiment, the real Easy Company, who trained, fought, and suffered together during World War II. It's the bond that they formed over 80 years ago, and their commitment to staying connected through the post-war is what made them a true band of brothers. And of course, it's why we are all here today. I know that we have some family members of Easy Company veterans here with us this weekend, and I would like to start by asking you all to wave or stand to be recognized. Thank you. Thank you all for joining us here in New Orleans. It truly is an honor to have you here with us. I'd also like to follow a museum tradition, and that is recognize all other veterans or active duty service members who are here with us this evening. Please again stand or wave and be recognized for your service to our country. Thank you for your service. And as Mike mentioned earlier, we're delighted to be joined by those of you who are tuning in online to our symposium. And all of this has been made possible with the generosity of some great sponsors, and I just want to take a moment to recognize them, and especially our presenting sponsors, Rick and Kathy Ramsey, for your support. So thank you, Rick and Kathy. And I think Rick and Kathy are like many of you in this room. They got started in their relationship with the museum through a visit, then a travel program, then another travel program. Then they got to know Sarah and Jeremy and Darcy. They came to the conference, and we have been hooked at the hip for the last 15 years since Rick took that first trip in 2012. And Rick even went and got his master's degree through our program at Arizona State. So Rick and Kathy, thank you again for being here, for your support, and helping make this special weekend possible. Also, I'd like to recognize a few other sponsors. First, one of my 47 bosses, Ryan Adgerson, a board member here at the museum, and his family Foundation, Cameron Batchelor, Michael Ganes, and Sharon Van Buren, SAS Gives, Holly Sasser, and Richard Thacker. So let's give all of them a round of applause for their support. Thank you. So I think everyone probably in this room here today knows that the museum's connections to Band of Brothers runs very deep and goes all the way back to our founder, Stephen Ambrose, who famously hunted down the veterans of Easy Company when they had their reunion right here in New Orleans in 1988. And it was from there that he and his team traveled throughout the country to do more in-depth oral histories. And of course, that all formed the basis for his book in 1992, Band of Brothers. And of course, you all know that that book was adapted into the reason we are all here, the iconic HBO miniseries of the same name, which premiered on September 9th, 2011. In fact, we also hosted a premiere party here in New Orleans with a screening at a local theater and an after party at the museum when all we had was that little one building, the Louisiana Pavilion. But how we remember these men, their service, and their sacrifice is overwhelmingly due to the series. And we are delighted to have over 30 of the cast and crew, many of them you'll be hearing from in this session. You've already gotten to hear from some earlier today, and they're going to share with us their insights in a way that I know you all are very much looking forward to. So I just want to thank the cast and the crew for what you have done to bring this significant story to life for millions of viewers around the world, and I think something that is unmatched and one of a kind, that 25 years later, we are still here, fascinated by this series, and I think we all believe that for the next 25 years, this will continue to inspire millions around the world. So let's give the cast and the crew a round of applause. And I appreciate everyone making the time to be here in New Orleans, and to all of you. We wanted to make it especially difficult to do this by having a conference in New Orleans the first week of August, just at the peak of heat and humidity. So the fact that everyone came to August, the end of July, beginning of August, also is quite extraordinary. Just a few other folks I want to acknowledge, and then I will get out of the way and let the folks that you're here to listen to get on with the session. But our 5-star Patriot Circle Society members and all of our Patriot Circle members who sustain our museum every single day, thank you for your support, and also for your belief in our mission and the work that we do. And I'm going to go off script a little bit here, just very briefly, because Mike's going to close out, and I want to at least take a moment to just acknowledge the extraordinary staff that we have here at the National World War II Museum and the Higgins Hotel and Conference Center. I know many of you have gotten to know our team personally. I'm going to name a few: Mike Bell, that you just heard from, Jeremy Collins, Sarah Kirksey, Darcy, Carl, but everyone on our crew that takes their work so importantly, they're passionate. If you would give our team a round of applause for their wonderful work. And happy birthday, Sarah. And you're included in that too, Lamont. So, yeah. Okay. So now it's my pleasure to introduce Kirk Saduski, who will chair our next session, celebrating 25 years of Band of Brothers, the beginning. Kirk has been an extraordinary part of our museum for 20 years. He has been involved in permanent exhibition development here. He has been involved in travel programs. He has been a member of our Presidential Counselors Advisory Group that advises me and my predecessor, Nick Mueller. Just about everything you see on this campus in our education programs, in some way, Kirk Saduski has had a hand in this over the last 20 years as this museum has literally come out of the ground. But his day job, of course, is that he is an executive at Playtone, the Gary Getzman and Tom Hanks production company behind Band of Brothers, and he's been there for almost 30 years. He has been involved in all of the series that I know you all have watched. Of course, Band of Brothers, John Adams, The Pacific. He has seen War and Masters of the Air. And he also served as co-executive producer on CNN's Decade series. So Kirk is going to lead this session, but just as a quick little bonus treat before we get there, there is someone else who would like to say a few words to you tonight, so please enjoy this brief video before we start our next session. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Tom Hanks. Stephen Ambrose interviewed every member of Easy Company of the 506th of the 101st Airborne Division in order to write Band of Brothers, along with Citizen Soldiers, which was one of his earlier works. Band of Brothers, however, was about a family, about not just a tight-knit group of ne'er-do-wells, but also about human beings that went through something profound in order to do something profound. Stephen Ambrose told of how every member, whether a non-com, whether a private, whether an officer, who made the 5 jumps in order to get their wings and dropped into places where they were surrounded. And why were they surrounded? Because they were paratroopers, and it's their business to be surrounded, as we say. Those men, many of whom visited the set, and certainly them and their families and their offspring, came to screenings and premieres, whether it was in Los Angeles or actually on the beaches of Normandy itself. And it is for them and for their story that we owe the biggest debt in regards to a night like tonight. They saved the world, and because of Stephen Ambrose and Dale Dye and the actors and the directors and the writers and every craftsperson in the entire crew for those many years that we took in order to make Band of Brothers. It's because of them that we were able to tell their story. And we did so. And congratulations to everybody there tonight. Take a moment to be proud of the fact that we are all a part of something unique, something that is a document, something that will live forever because it is so accurate. They saved the world. We told their story. Have a great night tonight.
Thank you, everybody, and thank you, Tom. As he said, they saved the world. We told their story. I'm going to start tonight. Well, first of all, this is just the beginning. Tomorrow we have 3 panels, including an actors roundtable where the actors will just talk amongst themselves, and we'll all benefit from that. I'm going to have everyone here. Tonight we're going to basically talk about how did this begin? How and why did Band of Brothers come about? You've got the people here and actually throughout who helped put it together, and then tomorrow we'll talk about the doing of it. I want to start, and then I'm going to have everyone introduce themselves. And basically, I played Frank Perconte. I was casting director. I wrote whatever episode it was. I'm going to start though with the fact that we've all come to understand is a part of the phenomenon of Band of Brothers. I usually ask people this question. I think most of you will probably know the answer, so I'll answer it for us. When did Band of Brothers premiere exactly? Do you remember? September 9th, 2001. And I think everyone here, everyone involved with the production understands that that's part of the success, but more importantly, the legacy of Band of Brothers, because for those couple of months after the attacks, America could tune into America at its best, what America's capable of when it's challenged. And we saw it, and this was by coincidence. We couldn't have known, maybe Tom knew, but we couldn't have known, of course, but we open every episode with Richard Winters, Carwood Lipton, Shifty Powers, Popeye Wynn, etc. So, excuse me. So when you tuned in, you were tuning into literally the best America has. With that, I'm going to just go down the rows and ask everyone, please identify yourself and your part in Band of Brothers. Please, Jimmy.
Hello, everybody. My name is James Madio, and I had the great honor of portraying Frank Perconte.
Hello, my name's Dexter Fletcher, and I played Staff Sergeant Johnny Martin.
Hi, everyone. My name is Erik Bork, and I was a supervising producer and writer.
My name is Erik Jendresen. I was lead writer and supervising producer.
Hello, I'm Ross McCall. I play Joe Liebgott.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tony Toe, and I'm one of the producers on Band of Brothers.
My name's Ivan Schwarz, and I was also a producer on Band of Brothers.
Hi, I'm Suzanne Smith. I am the UK casting director.
Hi, I'm Angela Terry, and I was part of the American casting team.
Meg Liberman, casting director.
I'm John Hughes, and I played Wild Bill Guarnere.
I know who you are. My name's Rick Gomez, and I played George Luz.
And I'm Shane Taylor, on home turf, played medic Eugene Rowe.
Thank you, guys. And there are more of us, Amy and Jen and Bruce and Dale. There are more people who will be on more panels tomorrow, so this is just the beginning. Let's start. We were talking backstage, and we were trying to get the chronology right, because this isn't just, for us, isn't just 25 years ago. This is like 27 years ago. So we're trying to figure the chronology out. So everyone, Tony's going to keep me honest. You guys are going to, Angela and Jen and Amy are going to keep us honest. But what I remember is, after Saving Private Ryan was such a huge success and really was a culturally changing movie. You know, I've said, I used to teach a class at UCLA on adapting nonfiction. And when we did the World War II class, I would say the Saving Private Ryan changed the culture, not just the cinema culture, but the culture of the United States in that first half hour. Because when the Higgins boats landed at Omaha Beach and that ramp went down, and then it was bing, 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 and 4 guys were dead. We had never seen that before. We had never seen combat portrayed with that kind of candor. And what we discovered when we were doing Band of Brothers, and we're going to get into all of these different topics, but the cliche had been, and not a cliche, it was true. We were talking about it last night as well. That the men, whether you were a paratrooper in Europe, a Marine on Guadalcanal, a sailor in the Philippine Sea, et cetera, you probably didn't tell many people about it. You just didn't talk about it. There were some exceptions, but by and large. And I think as I got to know, and as we got to know a lot of the men from Easy Company, and we would all ask, well, why didn't you talk about it? We live in such a different generation. We want to talk about everything. We want to confess everything. We want to take credit for everything. They didn't. And I discovered there were two reasons they wouldn't talk. One was, and I remember one gentleman in particular at one of the reunions told me, why would I tell the people I love most about the worst things I've ever seen? And in some cases had to do. The one gentleman in Denver said to me, okay, you leave here tonight, and when you walk out the front door, you see a fatal car accident. Would you go home and tell your wife, your children, your best friend, your mother, your father, would you describe it to them? No, of course not. The other reason, and I think this was even more common, was if you weren't there, you couldn't understand. And that's why I think they had the reunions. They wanted to talk about it, but essentially with each other. But here's where we get to Private Ryan. A lot of the men and their families told us that when they saw how the country responded to Saving Private Ryan, the candor in which it portrayed combat, that the American people were ready to see a non-sanitized, as unsanitized, of course it's film, of course this isn't really combat, but as close as it could possibly be. And people embraced it. And so many of the Easy Company veterans said, once we saw that the American public was ready to see something other than the Audie Murphy version, we're going to talk about it. So let's start. I think I remember, and Tony, please just jump in. So when Saving Private Ryan was such a success, Tom's agent, Richard Lovett at Creative Artists Agency, suggested, hey, there's a Stephen Ambrose book called Citizen Soldiers. Why don't we grab that and make a movie of that? I'm sure a lot of you here have read it, so you understand it's a great book, but it's a little unwieldy. It's about dozens and dozens of characters. But Tom said, I don't want to do that. But I read another Ambrose book, researching playing Captain Miller, called Band of Brothers, and I would like to do that. That's what I would like to do, and I'd like to do it as a limited series at HBO, which he and Tony had already done before Playtone had been formed at HBO. And he knew that that was the correct format. HBO said, yes, let's go. They agreed right away. Shortly after that, Steven Spielberg and Amblin became interested. Okay, well, if you're going to do Band of Brothers, we want to do Citizen Soldiers. Well, we knew that wasn't really competing. We didn't want to do a Sharks and Jets thing here. So Stephen and Tom had a little summit, and I think it was in Venice, wasn't it? And they meet and they hashed it out. Unfortunately or fortunately, Citizen Soldiers was put on the shelf, back on the shelf, and it was decided, okay, we're going to focus on Band of Brothers, and that's really the beginning of Band of Brothers. Tony, what do you remember from this part?
I think that's exactly it, Kirk. They both wanted, from their experience of Saving Private Ryan, they knew there were deeper stories to tell, more characters to explore, and the experience of war couldn't really be captured in a 2-hour movie. I think that's when they decided they wanted to tell and celebrate the story of the greatest generation. And I think the choice of Band of Brothers was because it was such an emotional journey as opposed to Citizen Soldier, which was a big sprawling.
It was like a big survey course of World War II.
And that's when I think I want to hand it over to Erik Jendresen.
Well, I'll get to Erik. Yeah. Believe me, I'll get to Erik. But
yes,
yeah, go ahead.
I think you have it correct. So continue with Erik.
And just before Erik, I'll get to you. I think, and the reason I know that Tom said it in the intro here, because Band of Brothers is a family. Easy Company was a family. This is a family story. It's a lot of things, and it's a family story, and it's also, and as my good friend Bruce McKenna said at the time, it's a love story. It's a love story about a group of guys who at the beginning of the tale wouldn't have chanced a cup of coffee. By the end of the tale, they're willing to die for each other. That's the story. So we were tasked at Playtone. So the first thing, we had to do 2 things right away. One is identify a screenwriter who's going to help us adapt Stephen Ambrose's great book. And we had, and the second thing we did, and we'll get into this a little bit later, Tom and Gary Getzman, his partner, said at the same time, we need to go document these guys. They were probably, by this point, I guess, late 70s, early 80s, and older. And we knew for several reasons. A, we just got to get their story down. Who knows how long? In fact, I believe the first veteran that we did send a crew to interview died before they got on the day they were supposed to arrive. So we knew we had to do this quickly. and we knew we had to do it well. We also wanted to do it not just for posterity and probably make a companion documentary, but also for research. You know, we're going to have the opportunity to sit down with Popeye Wynn and Carwood Lipton, and let alone with Major Winters, and really so many of the guys. And that this will prove invaluable to not only to the screenwriters when we bring them on, but also to the actors eventually when we do cast them. The first writer that we hired is Erik Jendresen. Erik, we met with Erik. We had read some of his previous work, and we met with him. We knew he was the right fit. He met with Tom and Gary, and it was a great fit. And so we introduced Erik to Richard Winters. Let me back up. I'm sorry. By this point, we had gotten to know Richard, and privileged. Many of us here were privileged to call him Dick. We met with Dick, and Erik will really expand on this. He had kept journals, not journals, but he had kept maps and action reports because he knew one day his Homer was coming along. And excuse me, and there we were. So, and I will say, Tom courted Richard Winters in the sense of, no, come be in my movie, but I admire you. I want to do this. I want to tell your story. Please help us do it. That's where I'm going to turn it over to Erik Jendresen.
Thanks, Kirk. Hard to know really exactly where to begin, except with a phone call from my agent. I was strangely enough, in Bristol, Pennsylvania, oddly enough, since so many of the guys ended up being from Pennsylvania, when I got this call out of nowhere from my agent about this book, and had I read it, and I hadn't, and I subsequently did, and it was Diana Choi who flew out to Bristol. I was there in a production, during a production of a play of mine, and she came out, and we spent so much time talking that she missed her train back to the airport. Subsequently, I just looked at the material and gave it a lot of thought, and was extremely excited about the challenge of it all, and divided the story into 13 episodes, and then went and met with Tom on the set of The Green Mile. We met in his trailer for the first time. And it turns out that he and I had broken down the story in exactly the same way. It was an identical sort of structural breakdown. And then I subsequently met with Stephen that same day, and then got tapped to be this lead writer and the first one in, sort of like a Pathfinder, I guess. And you know what was really singular about the experience as I look back at it 25 years later, and the phenomenon that it all is, and everybody talks about being a part of this unique experience. Well, it was a singularity from day one, actually. And just because I happened to be the first one in, I was able to have a perspective that I don't think anybody else did. I watched from day one as everything that happened in the course of this production was singular and unique and different from what I was used to, certainly working in Hollywood. The notion that I could meet one-on-one with Dick Winters and form a profound friendship that would last for many, many years, and watch as his story, the story of the men he led, step by step, day by day, as it got closer and closer to production, everybody who became involved in it realized that they were not making a miniseries. They were serving somebody else's experience. And I can't overemphasize how unusual that is in the business that we're all involved in. For all of the writers who came upon this story and the Bible that I crafted along with Major Winters' help, and used that as a jumping off place to watch everybody who became involved look at this thing and say, well, this is actually different. This is not about us. Watching egos completely set aside or checked at the door. Never seen anything like it. And it started day one. And it started from the top, certainly from the leadership that was shown to me by everybody at Playtone, and you played a huge part in that, because here we were about to launch what at the time would be the most expensive miniseries in history, and the guy kind of in charge back at home at Playtone is a historian, not a producer, a historian with an enormous heart and a tremendous intellect that was running this whole thing. So everything about this was highly, highly unusual. And I think that notion of serving the experience of these men who served this country in the manner in which they did infected everybody who was involved from day one to the premiere.
Well, thank you for the promotion, Erik. I was just a lowly executive. I was not a I know historians, but thank you. Erik, you worked very closely with Tom in those days. Tell us, I'm Erik Bork, I'm sorry. You were working so closely with Tom on some other projects. What do you remember from that very early time?
Well, for me and those of us here that worked on From the Earth to the Moon, which includes Tony Toe, who was my mentor on that, we had done this one big miniseries, and then Tom wanted to do another, and it was going to be this whole different thing because Steven was involved. And in the early days, I was working on other projects and had an office at Playtone and wasn't necessarily going to be involved with Band of Brothers, but there's a chance that I might be, and Tom wanted me to. And so while Erik was working on the Bible, my involvement, I remember for a long time, was unclear what it was going to be, but I knew it was going to be a massive project that chances are I would end up involved in some way. And then Tony came on board, who also I think was supposed to be doing something else, and Tom said, "Can you do this?" As I recall.
Yeah, So Tony, then now Erik's on board. Erik, you're there at the office at the Playtone offices in Santa Monica. Now this looks like this is going to happen. So you had the experience with Tom on Earth to the Moon, and again, Earth to the Moon was prior to Playtone's formation, but it was right after that Tom and Gary formed Playtone, and this was really unique. This was our first production. This is the first thing we attempted to do. But because of your relationship with both Tom and Gary, I know they called you and said, "Hey, we've got this big thing. You did Earth to the Moon, and this is going to be even bigger in scope and a little bit different format." Tell us of your experience, Tony.
I think I was in a wheat field directing in Canada, and my mobile rang, and on the other end was Tom Hanks going, where the heck are you?" And I said, "I'm middle of a wheat field in Canada." And he said, "We got the first Bible in from Erik, and we'd like you to come back and take a look at it and help us and be part of this." And when Tom calls, nobody can really refuse.
Regardless of where you are.
And I have to say, Erik and everybody talks about this project and how it comes from the top. Tom really threw himself into this project, unlike any other project I have ever seen him do. He may not have been in front of the camera, but he was there in England. He looked at every script, at every page, at every scene, at every character. He was the reader in every casting session that we had with Meg, Terry. Thank you. Sorry.
Still producing.
That's why we have actors. And I think part of that passion and that commitment to the real men of Easy Company just trickled down to each and every one of us.
Yeah, I'm glad you said the devotion to the real men. We're going to talk all weekend about the guys, especially when we start talking to Dexter and to Jimmy and Frank and Rick, everybody, because some of them got to know. I know Dexter. I know you met John, and you became very good friends with Frank, Jim. So we'll talk more about that. We will get to that, but we have to obviously start with Major Winters, and he was such from the start. He was still in 1998. He was still the company commander, even though by the end of the series he's now at regiment. He was still the company commander. And again, as we get into the stories of how he did the filming of the veterans and the documentary, we'll get more into that. But one of the other first things we did is Erik got to know Major Winters. I think Major Winters told me that you psychoanalyzed him, and I think but he didn't mean that as a joke. I mean, he wasn't being humorous. He meant it as I finally got to open up to somebody about this.
Yeah, that's really true. And if you knew him, for a gentleman like Winters to open up was really quite remarkable. And I should mention also that, you know, the publication of the book had inspired a lot of the veterans to remember and remember more and dig deeper into their footlockers, metaphorically, and find letters and journal entries and diaries and things that Ambrose didn't have. And they sent it all to Winters. Winters' little office at the top of the stairs there was the company headquarters. It was the nexus for all of that material, because the guys just sent it all to him. So when I finally showed up that first day, and that first weekend that I spent with him, I walked away with, I think it was 8 boxes worth of material, and most of it was new material that the publication of the book had inspired. So there was all of this fresh stuff to work with, you know, and it was about, I think it was about 8 months of focusing on it and working on it and getting to know it and understand it until I felt as though it lived in me like my own memory.
Right.
Before starting to commence with the Bible, and then having the ability to, first of all, he and I strangely just hit it off sort of from day one. I think we have very similar senses of humor, and he understood very early on that we were trying to do something different. And once his trust was gained, then he was the most extraordinarily forthcoming man I've ever met. And the amount of, he was so deeply personally involved in the crafting of all this. And the nature of the relationship was, it was daily, multiple times a day. We would have long conversations about every single aspect and every detail. And it was never about him. It was all about the experience of the men.
And then I'm gonna want to go to Ivan, but I've been asked so many times. You have, I know you have. What was Major Winters really like? And he's a very tough man to summarize, I promise you. But I will say this: I don't know how many college basketball fans there are in the audience. I'll bet it quite a few. Regardless, I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, have heard of John Wooden. He is the man. I got to know Richard pretty well as well. And he is the person. I went to UCLA, so I'm very familiar, and I grew up in Los Angeles. So I know very well who John Wooden was. That's who Richard Winters was. That kind of, he walks into a room and you listen to what he says. And whatever it is, he had an authority that was just unquestioned. And it was a moral authority that was just so obvious. So as Major Winters was on Erik's couch, production needed a liaison with Major Winters, and that's when Tony contacted Ivan. Tell us, you got very close to Richard and Ethel Winters. Tell us, Ivan, about your relationship with them.
I mean, I agree. He was a tough man he didn't let you in right away. And so I had to prove myself. So we were initially like going to talk with him, but he wouldn't talk with me or have breakfast with me until I read Undaunted Courage by Ambrose. And then I had to give him a book report of it the next day. I'm not kidding. And then I needed a letter from Tom Hanks introducing me to verify who I was in order for him to take this meeting. So that all had to happen very quickly because I was only in Hershey, Pennsylvania for a short period of time. And so that's how it all started. So I ended up with a letter from Tom. I ended up reading Undaunted Courage, really good book. I'm sure they sell it here. and reporting back to him. And then once you proved to him that you were serious, then he would, like Erik said, he would open up to you. We have great conversations. I got to know his wife Ethel very well. And throughout the production, I got to spend a tremendous amount of time with them. And well, the other veterans.
Yeah, and we'll get to all the other guys too.
But it was a remarkable experience, and he was a remarkable man. And the one thing I can tell you is that until the day he passed or one of the other veterans passed, they would have taken a bullet for him into their 90s. That's what kind of man he was, is that he
for them. And he for them. He would have taken one for them as well.
Yeah, but he was behind the lines, so he wouldn't have been shot at. No, but they would have, and I heard that over and over and over again. What did Major Winters think? And it was really amazing to see that what his legacy ended up being.
Speaking of the other veterans, so as I mentioned, one of the first things we did, we really kind of co-determinant as we were meeting Erik Jendresen, was to send a film crew to Dick's farm, to Carwood Lipton's home in West Virginia, Shifty Powers' home in North Carolina, Don Malarkey in Oregon, et cetera, et cetera. And we sent around a gentleman, a director by the name of Mark Cowan, and his two colleagues, Jody Burke and Will Richter. And they went to a lot of the homes. And this is our first contact. I mean, we had gotten to know Major Winters, but this is our first contact with them, and more importantly, their first contact with us, and can they trust us? And this is Hollywood, oh my God. But one of the things that we discovered was that the night before our crew would show up at the respective Easy Company home, Major Winters would call them and say, you can trust these guys, and I would appreciate it if you talk to them, it's up to you, and gave them, not their orders certainly, but encourage them. And again, when you have that kind of moral authority, that's really all you need. And so he continued to do that. And then as we got to know the guys, and as Erik and you guys got to talk to the men who really did open up, and again, over the next 3 days, we'll talk more specific things, particularly when we can integrate the actors more into the conversation. But one of the, as I told you that story, I think it still remains our favorite story of Playtone, of the whole experience. Why is there a crowd outside, the house, this house? Did people think, that Tom Hanks is going to be here? And no, of course not. What it really was, it's the first time grandpas told these stories, and they told their stories. I remember I went to a reunion in Denver, and the Mark Cowan called me. I called him when I got to the airport, and I called him, hey, just to check in, and he said, just get a hold of yourself before you get here, because you've never seen anything like it. And so when I got there and I went to my first evening of reunion, I had to basically catch everybody up and give a little talk. And I realized very quickly, this is not a reunion of a bunch of World War II veterans. Or a group of World War II veterans. This is an extended family reunion, because the wife of one guy knew exactly, and Chris, you're shaking your head because knew exactly what was happening with the grandson of somebody else. They knew each other's business in the best possible way. And it evolved into that. I know it took a while before that part of the reunions, that family part, but as the families grew, and as they had children and they had grandchildren, you realized they all knew basically the way you know your cousins and your brothers and your sisters, let's say cousins, they knew what was going on and continued to. They had reunions every year from 1947 And I don't know the exact last year, but it was well into the 2000s. So we all understood that. When you signed on, you understood that was the process. Guys, let's talk about, and then we want to get to casting too, because I know that's, how did you decide, and Erik, how did you break it up? Who was going to tell which episode, and even which incidents from the book are going to be dramatized?
Before I answer that, I just wanted to underscore something that you brought up. One can't say enough about Mark Cowan and what he did, not only in the event, but for the show ultimately. And I just like to briefly speak about this, because you mentioned that was sort of the first ones in with cameras. And so here's this documentarian with a documentarian's touch and an elegant approach to making documentaries, who showed up in the early days before these gentlemen really knew that they could trust us, before they'd met their actors, before they'd gone, we'd advanced very far. And it was very early days, and the way in which Mark acquitted himself and got their trust, and what he captured on camera was so extraordinary, and would end up branding the series.
Yeah, and it was Mark, and it was and Will and Jody. They were, because I saw firsthand. I remember we were in New Orleans. We were at the reunion in 2000, I believe it was. Yes, it was 2000, and it was at they were holding it at the Hotel Monteleone, and you went from a year before. Grandpa didn't talk about it. They were lined up in the hallway to get into the room to talk to Jody and Will, and particularly Mark. They had, and really Mark, got them to open up about you, and you see it. You've seen the footage at the beginning of every episode. You've seen the documentary, I hope. You see how Babe Heffron responds so emotionally. You see how emotional Carwood Lipton gets, and you helped with the interviews with Winters, I know. You see how emotional Richard Winters got, and we can all tell you that was not his normal. That was not his. He was very emotional. He obviously kept his emotions in, and he was an emotional man. But he did not reveal them easily. Tell us, how did you break up the?
It was 26 years ago, Kirk. So. My memory of what happened was after the Bible was done, and then there was this moment of, well, who's going to do this? And there was a moment in which I think it was considered that I was going to write the whole damn thing, which was not possible. And that was very, very clear from jump. And I think actually because Gary had worked with them on something in the past, Emax Fry was the first writer to come in.
And let me take it from here just for a second.
Okay.
Our band of writers was beginning with Erik Jendresen, Erik Bork, who had already had a very close working relationship with Tom. Max Fry, who had worked with Gary on a previous project. But then Tom said, I would really like to get some young writers who have not been produced yet. They obviously have to be good and talented, but let's give them a shot, because that's who these guys were. That's who was up. That's who Easy Company was. These guys, they'd never jumped into combat before. So Erik, Bruce McKenna,
John Orloff,
and John Orloff, John Orloff, of course. So that's when, and then Erik kind of was the company commander, and away you guys went.
Right, and so I was given my choice of which episodes I wanted to write, and I specifically chose episode 1, 5, and 10, the beginning, the middle, and the end. And especially episode 5, because I knew it was Winters-centric, and it was that crossroads moment, and it was going to be the most intimate attempt to tell his story, and it was going to be dicey for him. So that was my responsibility as his friend, to make sure that I had my hands on that one. And then I think it was just a pretty democratic system of who wants to write what.
Right.
And I remember John really wanting to write episode 2.
The D-Day episode, yeah.
And 9. And Bruce. Well, that's not really true.
That's not true, Bruce.
That's not
Come
true,
on.
because you went right after Bastogne.
Well, go ahead, sir. I'm sorry.
No, and actually Max wanted to write I think the trickiest episode in many ways.
The Carentan, yeah.
The Carentan episode.
Well, I want to get to. I want to involve more of us here on this. So, and this will keep coming out, the creation. So we do get these scripts eventually, and now it's up to you, Meg, and Angela and Suzanne. It's up to you guys. Tell us a little bit about that. How did you match everybody from Damian Lewis to to Frank, John Hughes, and Bill? Tell us about that process. And I know Tom, and Stephen to an extent, but I know Tom, how involved he was in the casting.
Well, in the beginning, all I had was photos of the men, of the real guys. We also had, we had all their bios, but they were really short. They were like 2 sentences. It sort of gave you sort of clues to what they, clues to who they were. And then we had a scene, the role of Jones, that I think Erik wrote.
That's your,
and
Erik Bork wrote.
And that was for episode 8 that turned out to be the last episode that Tony directed. But that was it. And basically, from just the descriptions of where everyone was born and, their background before they joined up, we read people and sort of figured out from that who could be somebody in this show. There were certain criteria that they had to fulfill. They had to, in casting, you have to have someone you can afford. You have someone who wants to go to the UK for 10 months. They have to want to, they had to want to go to boot camp.
And we will be talking about boot camp.
Not everybody was right for this show. I only had one actor that backed out after our mix and match session that after Stephen and Tom had seen him, they decided he didn't want to go. But there were, they had a feel of the period. That was also the other really important thing. They couldn't be like an actor that would say, "Hey man," or, whatever. They had to have, they had to be, it was a certain type of person. And my background from casting a lot of shows, like I cast Fame before that, and I cast the Wonder Years and stuff. So I knew a lot of the young actors, and I knew a number of the people that wound up getting cast in the show. But as time went on and we started getting more and more material, Tony can speak better to the timeline because it is a long time ago. But that's basically, it was great because the best part of casting is making discoveries from my point of view. And, it was an incredibly fun project to work on. And obviously, because it was a true story, it resonated so deeply, not only with us, but with the actors themselves that came in.
Angela, tell us about your experience on it. Obviously unique. We're all saying how unique this was. You had never worked. None of us had worked on anything like this and never been done. Tell us your experience.
Never before and never after. I realized after Band of Brothers I had peaked.
Well,
it's completely messed me up. But the reverence with which each of the actors that came at us, it started when that breakdown went out, and there was a fury that did not let up for 6 months, and I've never seen that before. And the passion that came from the American actors and the British actors to be a part of the project went clear back to their roots. It felt like it was blood driving them from their family histories to be a part of this. We had people drop off rations and anything to get our attention. And they'd come in uniform to the window and, "Can I audition for Band of Brothers?" It was relentless. It really was. Buckets and buckets and buckets of submissions.
I think Ross McCall came in to his audition and kissed Meg Liberman on the mouth.
Shameless. Wait, Suzanne, speaking, so obviously we have a very... No, we're not. Ross, you'll get your chance. Okay.
I don't need to explain a thing. You won't know.
The decision, and we Tony can talk better about this, but the decision was made. Did you want to respond, Meg?
No, I wanted Ross to explain.
All right, very quick, Kirk. I'll be 2 seconds. I go in. Meg has. They have to meet a lot of people when they're casting shows, right? A lot of hands come in, a lot of handshakes, a lot of people want to be a little close, right? She had a sign outside. First of all, I met Angela first. I went in. It was in a hotel suite in London. It doesn't sound as dodgy as I'm saying right now. It was very nice, and everybody was there. And I met Angela, and I went in full American. I from day one, I was like, I'm not going to let them know I'm a Brit. This was pre-internet, so I could sort of get away with it somewhat. So I went in fully like I was from Yonkers, because I did a play about Yonkers, and so I went in with a silly accent. I met Angela. She then says, go in and see Meg. I go in, and Meg had this sign outside that says, please don't shake hands. So me being me at 24 years old, I went in and I said, hey, Meg, nice to meet you. I see we're not shaking hands. How about a kiss on the mouth? End of story.
And that's all it took.
Say again?
No.
And the rest of the story we'll leave
That
alone.
was it. It was all mostly a professional.
Okay, all right. Suzanne, the decision was made to shoot in the UK. We obviously have a very large British cast. Tell us about casting British actors as American soldiers.
I think the hardest thing was Meg wanted to make sure that everybody could do an American accent. That was your biggest concern. She also loved Brits because, you know, we look, we don't look modern. You love English teeth. So, yeah, I mean, we shot just outside of London in Hertfordshire. It was an old Air Force base, Hatfield. I don't know if you all know that, but it was an amazing experience. And it wasn't just the boys, the American boys, that we cast. We had to cast French, German, and so there were sort of other accents as well. But it was a really big task. So you would often have to come in and then have to come in again with a different role. I'm sure, I mean, how many auditions, how many months of auditions did you do?
All I know is there were 144 roles, and I think 38 Brits got leads, and I think 14 Americans, it's maybe 18. But it was an enormous undertaking.
Yeah, you know, Kirk, I think Meg started in summer of 1999, and Suzanne came on 3 months later, 4 months later, and they kept casting. And through the shoot, we kept casting through the shoot. So they were on it for a long time. And I think one of the great joys of casting for Band of Brothers was, even though we were the most expensive miniseries ever, we never were asked by HBO to cast a big name actor. We had the privilege of casting the right actor for the right character.
Yeah, and that was an edict. I mean, that was I mean, I know for Tom for sure, we didn't really want to. We didn't want it to be an indent. There was one obvious exception in the cast, but we really didn't want
it was
you to
about
think
the best actor.
It was about the best actor, and that he wanted you to get to know that. He wanted you to get to know the character, not the actor.
And I have to say, the reason that we didn't have to cast like that with the big names or to satisfy the studio was because we had Stephen and Tom.
Sure.
They were the ones who were going to market the show, and that took the pressure off of us, off of Meg and Suzanne and Terry, to find the best actors. And we were lucky enough to find these guys. Frank, Ross, Shane, all of these people.
Before. All right, Rick, we're gonna get there. Okay, I can't believe these. I can't.
That's what you
we're
get
gonna
for
get to
sitting
the.
behind me.
I have one last question for Meg, and then I definitely want to hear from the other side.
Yeah.
So again, and I remember when Damien was cast, and there was a little bit of a wait a minute, a Brit to play Mr. America. I mean, the other thing, the thing I should have mentioned when I compared Major Winters to John Wooden is they're both from Indiana. And so how do you get a classically trained British actor? Why did we cast a classically trained British actor to play Richard Winters?
Well, to be perfectly honest, I did not want to cast a British actor as Dick Winters. No way. What did you say, Jimmy? Did you say something?
Wow.
It was really, it was basically, he was the guy. I mean, we saw other people, but no one was close. I mean, it was really, and Tony reminded me of of the story how he was in London and saw him. I wasn't there on that trip, I don't think. And you sort of had him in the back of your mind. And he kept saying to me, now I remember this, you kept saying, I got this guy, he's in England, and I'm like, no, it has to, and I kept trying to find an American, and just.
Didn't you see him, or did Spielberg in Hamlet, right, on stage?
Yeah.
He wasn't playing Hamlet, he had a.
Yeah, as a coincidence.
Was we brought Damien out. Sorry. We brought Damien out from London, and there was a big session with Meg and Tom on a Friday, I remember. And he came in probably 10th or 11th, and I had told him to stay American, like Ross. Don't reveal that you're British at all, just do the reading with Tom and Meg. And I think after he did it, we all looked at each other and said, he's Dick Winters. And then the whole Laertes thing happened on Saturday because we got Stephen in to take a look at
it was just Damien. A meeting because he didn't need to read him because he knew his work.
Yeah. So he came in to meet Damien on a Saturday, and he sat down and he said, oh, you look really familiar. Weren't you Laertes in Hamlet with Ray Fiennes and on Broadway? And he said, yeah, that's right. And he said, you're our guy.
There you go. Well, let's talk about the other guys. Jim, Dexter, tell us about the other side of the coin. You've been hearing from us what we were looking for, what we wanted, what Tom needed. What were you guys, young actors? This is a huge project.
Well, I was first offered the role of Richard Winters. I did not want to work for scale, and so no. Obviously, a lot of you guys already know my story. I was a young street kid, and when my agency managers got wind of this and the breakdowns that Tom and Steven are putting together this epic show, I think every young man in Hollywood wanted to get in and be seen for this. My manager at the time knew Meg, and if we got time another time, she'll tell that story. But I almost lost the role. And I was part of that 6-month ordeal. I went in every month and read for different characters and read with Tom at one point, and then was there for the last session. And what I do remember about the last session is we were told, you're going to be there for 6 hours. You're going to have an hour break in between, but just be prepared to potentially be there for 6 hours, if what I recall. And I was one of the first ones brought in. And then I came, and I thought we did a good job. I went in with Kirk Acevedo, John Hughes, which is 3 Bronx guys, and I thought we knocked it out of the park. Steven was in there with the camera, and it was exciting, and he remembered me from Hook, and I was over the moon, knocked it out the park, walk out, probably all piss and vinegar, looking every actor up and down, kind of going, good luck, it's mine. And I didn't get called in again for the entire time. And when Meg came out and thanked us all for our time, and they're going to make decisions soon, I remember walking back because I had like boots on and camo pants on and tried a green shirt on. I just remember almost like breaking down and crying because I really wanted the role. And then, another month went by, and I got the call that, you'd be portraying Frank Perconte. And what's funny, Meg, because you say you only got like a brief little description. My description that I got from you guys was Frank Perconte, Chicago, Roman-nosed Italian-American. That's all I got. So I'm going, well, I got a big nose, I guess, you know?
But
before we get to
the fact that you were British was never really an issue.
No. Would you all love to see my British accent?
Dexter, and then I know it's the same. It was same with you, Jim. But this is a guy that you got to meet. You got to meet Sergeant Martin. Talk about that. That's a thing you just can't make it up because you have a responsibility to the man you're getting to know.
Yeah, that's one of the profound moments that happens during the process, you know, because you audition for the part, you come meet Meg, and you do your best American accent, like Ross. You maybe don't go for the kiss, but you want to impress. But more to the point, throughout the process, a lot of the veterans started to arrive and turn up on set, and you kind of had a sense that you had a responsibility to this incredible generation of men, what they sacrificed and what they did. But meeting them and talking to them took it to a completely different level. I mean, we'd been through boot camp, and the captain, you know, did his best to make us understand to give us some context of really what it was that we were portraying and what story we were telling. But when I first spoke to Johnny on the phone, I remember being on set. It was a blistering hot sunny day, and I think Guarnere and Babe had already come and visited, and they were around, and of course everyone swarmed around them. They were big stars to us. They were very important people. But my own personal experience was when speaking to Johnny for the first time, was I kind of, you know, there was so much I needed and wanted to understand about what his journey was. And so I said to him, what was your first encounter with the enemy? That was something that was a burning question for me. And after, you know, sort of polite chit-chat and stuff. And he then told me a really personal and moving story about him landing with somebody else in France and hiding in a barn and the French communicating with him that the Germans would come to collect milk in the morning. And so they hid up in the hayloft of the barn, and sure enough, these two young Germans came down the road to collect the milk that morning, and they shot them. They attacked them. I can't go into detail of what really happened to him then, but what did happen with Johnny is that he started to cry on the phone, and I could hear that and feel that, and that then made even more prescient and clear to me about the responsibility that we had playing these men and telling their stories, because this was the generation, it was still within living memory, the story that we were telling, and that's what was really important, it seemed to me, and kind of profound about it, that they'd gone through this incredible, tough experience, and that, that they were the lost generation of it, and so sorry, but. Yeah, so it was really difficult. It's a real shift in understanding being an actor, because you get to play all these different roles, you get to play different parts, and you imagine and invent. But it's so rare that you get an actual, really emotional, real contact with something so deep and personal and profound.
And not just a real person, but a real person who did something really important.
Yeah.
Ross, tell us about, other than your Romeo impression, tell us about your experience and. With Band of Brothers, and again, playing this real American soldier.
First of all, Meg, I'm sorry this came up. We'll let it slide. It's dead now. People have often asked me. I didn't get to meet my guy. He passed away way before the shooting started. And at first, I sort of felt a little hindered by that. Somewhat, I guess I was a little envious that the guys were getting these big portfolios of their men, with family numbers, letters, communications with their veteran. And I got a manila envelope with one picture, and it was a picture from the book. And I was like, guys, save some paper. Come on, what are we doing? But I only had this one image of Joe. And I obviously used the book. I'd used the book as research as I was auditioning. I got through that book, and I had it in my back pocket for a long, long time. So I had that to go on. But what I quickly realized was the veterans that we did meet, just like Dex saying, you know, when Babe and Bill came down, it was like the Beatles had arrived. We were so excited to be around them and honored to be around them. And once I started speaking to the veterans, Johnny Martin became a dear friend of all of ours. We used to go to his house over in Arizona. It was like, you know, we all got to know all the vets really well. And I realized quickly that they don't talk about themselves very often, but they will talk about their buddies. And so it was something that I realized I was actually very fortunate in a way, because I could go to them and lean on them a little and say, tell me about the kid, tell me about him. And there was a strange moment that was very emotional at the time, where I could sense that they were sort of using me as their representation of Liebgott. You know, she's no longer here, so they sort of liked it in a way. They liked retelling the stories. So for me, it was just a vast amount of knowledge that I got from the other veterans.
Thank you, Ross. Well, and speaking of, I believe, and we've talked about this a lot, in terms of the closest relationship, actor to veteran, was Frank John Hughes and Bill Guarnere. I think we'd all agree with that. You guys, I mean, truly, you were became his son. You tell us about playing Wild Bill Guarnere and what was that? And I know it changed your life. Talk us about that.
I got lucky. I had a lot to work with. He was larger than life. And my first contact with him was, I had done about 3 or 4 auditions with Meg and with Tony and with Tom. And before the final audition, I went to see Meg, and she told me, there may be a tape on my desk that has footage of Bill Guarnere, and his phone number may be in that case, and I may go to the bathroom. And when I come back, that may be gone, and I won't know who took it. And I said, okay. And she said, excuse me, I have to go to the bathroom. She left. I took the tape, and I left, and I called him. And I didn't know how to pronounce his name. I thought it was Guarnere, because I thought it would be Italian, but they had Americanized it. And I said, Mr. Guarnere, yowza. That's how he always answered the phone. And I said, Mr. Guarnere, I'm Frank Hughes, and I'm going to be auditioning for you. You can't, kid. They already got him. And I said, what? He said, they already cast him. I had dinner with him last night. And I said, all right. Well, I'm going to go to the audition anyway. So I started to talk. He said, oh, really nice kid. He's from New York. You'd like him. You know. And I said, wow, really threw me. And I said, well, I'm going to go. And I said, Mr. Guarnere, do you have any advice? And he said, yeah, just remember, I was a 19-year-old paid killer. Anything else? I said, no, that's good, sir. You know, I went and I got the job, and we did the final audition, and I got it. I remember Jim at the audition. I was next to him. He was amazing, and I was saying, if they're thinking about him from Guarnere, I'm not getting it. He was so good, and Steven knew him, which was incredibly intimidating. To be standing next to someone and Steven Spielberg go, Jimmy! You know, I was just like, oh, forget it. You know, this guy's in it. And then I got the role, and I called Bill. And I said, Mr. Guarnere, unfortunately, your friend didn't get the job. He didn't get it, and I got it. And I would really like to talk to you. And immediately, whatever you need, kid. And he just, as fearless as he was in combat, it's as fearless as he was doing the next hardest thing, which was just sharing, which he did not share. And we just talked 3 or 4 hours every day, all the way up to production, through production, and he just, anything I needed, he gave me. And in that, he became like a second father to me. His family, everyone. He was just became such an important person in my life for the rest of his life.
I was going to say, because it carried on for the rest of Bill's life, your special relationship with him.
Yes.
Can I just add
Please.
one thing, which is that the other actor that sought out Guarnere himself, he was in the running, like sort of generally, and went to his house. And, you know, he was someone that we had considered, but it was just so, this is how actors are. They just really, you know, when you really want something, he really went to meet him and all that, and it didn't pan out. So the right guy got the part, but that's acting.
Rick, is that
That's
what
prep.
actors are really like?
That's
Rick, tell us about playing George Les.
Oh, man. First, I'd like to say that I have the utmost respect for Meg Liberman and would never try to kiss her on the mouth. I would never say anything like that. I would never insinuate anything like that. And Meg knows that. Meg knows that deeply. And I want this audience to know that as well. Yeah, I don't, I mean, we've talked about this so much. It feels like, to me, so much of the experience as I remember it is meeting a bunch of young guys my age who felt like they all wanted to pull the weight in the same direction at the same time. And if you didn't do that, you weren't going to be a part of it. And so we all decided we were going to do it with everything in us. And we kept each other in check, and we demanded that we did that, and we still kind of do to this day. I got married on September 15th, 2001, 6 days after we aired, 4 days after 9/11. How many guys went to my wedding? Yeah. There's a bunch that are still not here. So it's not a thing we say, it's a thing we practice. This group of men, we stuck together. Those guys were the example of that. But it spilled all over the place, and it spilled all over us, and we're family. And so then we get to share that with you. So yeah, we can reminisce about all this. I mean, I have tons of. I had the best day of my life auditioning with Tom when I auditioned for Loves. I auditioned for a bunch of characters, but because it's Tom Hanks, you're auditioning with Tom Hanks. How is that going to suck? It's not going to be the greatest day of your life. But really, the thing that weighs most on me as I get to sit on stage with these guys is that what we achieved together and what we held, the standard we held each other to, and the friendship we still have to this day. So
Great. Thank you, Rick.
Yeah.
Shane, so you played Doc Rowe, and you're in several episodes, but episode 6, the episode that Bruce insists nobody.
The one that nobody
no,
wanted
but
to.
and then I was talking to somebody last night. The really part of the genius of that idea, Bruce, I think, is that by making the medic, who at that point, I mean, that was different to even think to tell it through a medic's point of view and not a combat soldier, is that not only did it give us the Angel of Bastogne, but it forced our main character to go from foxhole to foxhole. So we got to incorporate so many different characters organically in that story. You're obviously not a Cajun, but you were asked to play a Cajun. Tell us all about that challenge.
Wow. Yeah. Cajun. I first of all, I had a kind of a healthy envy, if you like, because like Ross, Roe had passed away a couple of years before we shot. So seeing the other fellas being able to kind of connect, it would have been interesting. But I know because Chris, Doc Rowe's grandson, an old friend of mine now, I remember he told me that he used to get as much as, well, he tried to get stuff out of his grandfather, and he just wasn't a talker. So whether that would have changed later on, I don't know. But so for my way in was to go through Ralph Spina, who was another 101st medic, and he gave me some great things. And this guy right here, Frank, who was like the soul connector. The way Bill Guarnere was in real life with everybody, Frank was our man. And Frank would often come up to me because he'd be talking with Bill, and he'd give me a story or an anecdote of Doc, and it was just really helpful for me. It really made me feel part of what was going on.
Frank, you and I have talked about it, about how you would have to talk about the Carwood Lipton when Bill wouldn't talk about Bastogne and what happened to his leg. But tell us about how you got that information, who you got that information from, and how.
Just to go to Shane, during boot camp when we were hurt and your feet would be bleeding, and he would come. They were training him as a medic, and he would come and he'd wrap your feet and put bandages on it. And at one point I said, Doc, what the hell are you doing? You were like in the West End 2 weeks ago. like yeah. Now you're my primary care physician. How did this happen? You know. And no one doubted him. If you got hurt, you yelled for him. He came. He fixed you. It was amazing. Another credit to Captain Dye and how they were training us. When the scene came for Bill to lose his leg, Bill, of course, would talk about everyone else's bravery and not his own. So I called Carwood Lipton, who was a wonderful man, just a classy, elegant, wonderful guy. And I called him and I said, I'm asking some questions. We're getting ready to shoot the scene. And he said, Frank, I was there. It's one of the worst days of my life, and I really want to tell you about it. And he started to talk, and he broke down. He just started crying. And I said, Mr. Lipton, we don't have to talk about it. I thought I'd call Don Malarkey or someone. I said, we don't have to talk about it. He said, no, Frank, I want to get it right. It's important to me. And he said, so long ago we had landlines. And he tapped on the phone and he said, can you hear this? And he tapped. And I said, I can hear that. And he said, do it. And I tapped it on the phone. And he said, that's the tempo of Bill's leg flapping when it was blown off with the involuntary nerve damage that was happening. And I said, thank you, sir, and that's the kind of attention to detail that no one will ever get. No one knows that. But when my leg is flapping, it's the Carwood Lipton's beat. And that's how a first-person experience of, that's how intense the research was. And you times that by 1 million, everyone's got a story similar, or that's where it came from.
We're gonna take some questions in a bit. So I want to kind of wrap up a little bit by asking each of the actors, how has this changed your life? Playing John Martin, Frank Perconte, Bill Guarnere, Doc Rowe, John Liebgott, how has this changed your life? You all well-known, great actors, but this was special. I'm going to start with you, Jimmy.
Yeah, well, it's given me purpose. I mean, that's all I can say. It's brought me lifelong friends, family. It's brought me to the beaches. It has brought me to the foxholes, to the cemeteries. It introduced me to the real men of easy company, and it's changed me forever, as most of you here know. It's a badge of honor, and I'm very proud to be a part of it. So,
it's hard to quantify because you learn so much. But it is. I think it's like Jim says. The family that we created amongst ourselves is something that's completely unique to this job. But it's also just in terms of storytelling and how it's important to tell real stories authentically as possible. And that's there's an authenticity about everything that runs through right from the inception of Band of Brothers. Even you talk about it, that authenticity, that truth, that gives the whole show just this kind of evergreen kind of, you can watch it again and again and again. The detail is so rich. So just as a storyteller, which is what we are as actors, to have that and learn so much about that, but also the brotherhood that we've all really benefited from throughout the rest of our lives.
Great, thank you, Ross.
Yeah, I mean, it's immeasurable, really, the life change it gave all of us. I think we did all become the men after the show. Really, it was such a huge part of my life, and I know it was for the rest of the guys. We remained in our veteran's name throughout the entire shoot. All of us. There was 6 months down the line, we started to know each other's name, but really before then, it was just everyone knew each other as the character we were portraying. And to live in that skin and to live in their, stepping in their footsteps, wearing their dog tags, it is the greatest gift in so many ways. Frank has poetically said many times before, Meg didn't just cast a show, she cast our best friends. And to come out of that, and we've all gone on and done whatever we've done throughout the last 25 years, but that bond is unique. Even the history of the show, listen, I'm a Scotsman. I always say I'm a Scottish Catholic who sounds English playing an American Jew who speaks German. And
yeah, but you got the role because of your kiss, let's face it.
And so I had to learn a lot, you know, and I did, and it stuck with me, and Liebgott will forever be a part of my own soul, and I truly mean it.
Frank?
Or
Shane, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to. I know it was a lot of Cajun tapes, by the way.
Right. Okay.
A lot of Cajun. But yeah, I think it just. I think just thinking about what they did, the sacrifice, the courage. For me personally, you just try to live well, be a good person, be there for others. Unity of purpose. I said this earlier on in a panel. You know, I have a family, I have 2 girls, and you know, you just try and you know, appreciate what they did, and you know, live your life and have a code of conduct that you know, respects what they gave. And yeah, I think on a personal and a professional level, you know, it was just overwhelmingly enriching. I've been able to meet so many people from doing it. A lot of you in this room, fascinating people. And I don't take that for granted. It was life-changing in so many ways that it's hard to solidify, but I'll never forget the experience.
Rick?
It was an extraordinary story about extraordinary men, and it was made by extraordinary people. And when you're not exposed to extraordinary and you get a chance to be exposed to extraordinary, that changes every cell in your body, because then you know what it is for the first time. And so to work with Playtone, to work with Tom, what EJ said about it trickling down from the top, that's in every line of every piece of writing. It's in every effort. It's in every command that Cap gave us. It's the care and love we put into it, and it's the stuff we still carry. So, you know, it's all of this. I would say the same thing Jimmy said. I would say the same thing Dex said. I share every sentiment and would only just add that. It is beautiful to be a part of something extraordinary.
Frank?
It changed the man I was. It changed my career. Playing Bill was the great honor of my life. The job, no matter what we do, is the great legacy of our life. We'll never match it. Tom told me that when we were cast. This is it, kid. You'll never do anything this, no matter what you do. This is a big one. But also, it was the great spark, because when I think about Band of Brothers, I think about boot camp, and we put a lot on that, but I've been to all these guys' weddings. I've seen their children born. We've been to the funerals. We've been through the sicknesses together. It's a lifetime. It's 25 years of being a family, and it expands beyond the cast. It's Meg's life and Angela's life and everyone who's in here. Amy McKenzie, Jen Jack, everybody who's here. We're all in it. It's one huge family, which brings it back to what you saw about it, that it was a family.
Hey, Kirk,
go ahead,
let
Ivan.
me speak like as a crew member. Like, you know, it changed our lives too. And one thing that I think is really important is not only did it change my life personally, Tony introduced me to my wife, that's pretty personal, on Band of Brothers, but also it reminds me every single day of the cost of freedom. And the one thing this show has just resonated with me for 25 years and even, you know, and hopefully longer, is that freedom is not free, and that these men, we would not be sitting here today and having discourse in our country or whatever it is if it wasn't for these men. And that is a huge responsibility to share with the world, and I'm realizing now, I've just kind of realized this late in the process, that this show has given us all the opportunity to do something about that and not forget those people who are serving today and protecting our freedoms so we can sit here today. And it's because of the Bill Guarneres and the Babe Heffrons and the Dick Winters and the Malarkeys and the Martins and everybody that's served and everybody that's currently serving. And this show reminds me of that every day. So I really wanted to share that.
Thank you, Ivan. One last comment, then we're going to take some questions. Obviously, Frank, I mean, you pointed it out. The spirit of Easy Company is contagious. what I experienced in Denver, we have now all experienced together. This is a family reunion as well. So thank you very much. We're going to take a few questions, I think, from Jeremy.
Round of applause for our panelists, please. So we have some questions that were submitted prior for those lucky few. We're going to start first. Many of the episodes spotlight a character or pair of characters. For instance, episode 6, Roe and Babe. Episode 7, Lipton and Spears. Episode 8, Webster. How were those decisions made regarding which character or pair to focus on for each episode? And I'm going to guess that that's best for writers, producers,
We'll throw that
directors.
to Erik.
It was not that complicated, actually. When you look at the event, whether it was in episode 6, the first of Bastogne, or 7, which was really told through Lipton's point of view, it kind of spoke to us, and it was clear that there would be one or two characters who were either particularly affected by that particular portion of the tale, or they were particularly appropriate to tell it through their eyes or through their experiences, their point of view. I mean, the story really sort of told itself in that. Those selections were made by the events themselves.
Yeah, well, again, to go back to Bruce in episode 6, obviously, if the idea is to tell it through the medic's point of view because that's unique, it presents the opportunity to actually incorporate a lot of other characters. That's where the situation dictates which character.
That one particular episode is a little bit different in that what Bruce and I talked about at the beginning, trying to crack that thing, was that we had a fundamental cinematic problem. Because in Bastogne, all the guys are essentially in pairs, and they're in foxholes.
Right.
And how the hell do you cinematically, how do you conveniently get from one to the other, without contrivance? And then the notion that we had upon, I think, together was that, well, there was one guy who was looking for some scissors. And he had to go from foxhole to foxhole. And we followed him, and all of a sudden the story just opened up in that way.
Jer?
I promise this one isn't a plant because I know many of the actors have traveled with us on our wonderful educational travel programs that you can learn more about outside at the travel table. But Raymond from California would like to know, have any of you visited the locations where Easy Company fought? If so, what was it actually like to visit the places where the unit was? And I would like to not limit that just to the actors, but I know you guys have been there.
I'd like to start with that because I was just there helping the museum just a couple months ago. And this will bring up somebody else who's with us today in the audience, Anthony Pratt. Anthony Pratt was our production designer. And yes. And I was just there, and I had never been to Europe many times, but I had never been to these particular spots. And two places in particular really struck me. One was on the dike in Holland, where the crossroads. And I thought, it was to the letter. I felt like I had been here before. It was deja vu because you had captured it and you had designed it and built it to the T of what it was. Later on that trip, we were in the Bois Jacques outside of Bastogne. And again, I felt as if I had been there. I had been there because of how you designed it, how you built it, and how you maintained it. So hats off to you, Tony. And every other thing you see in that show in between. So he really is part of the secret sauce. Jer?
I just want to add that as part of the preparation for shooting Band of Brothers, we retrace Easy Company's steps through Europe with Tom and with Anthony Pratt and with Ramey, our cinematographer. And that's where Tony took a lot of notes, a lot of pictures, and reproduced that journey for the actors to travel through.
And that's the thing. There's so many people that go in that contribute to this. These guys are justifiably the face of the show, of course, but so many people have to do their jobs. We talked about authenticity. It's devotion, and it when you pay that close of attention, as Anthony obviously did, but everybody involved in the show, it does filter down. I think somebody said that earlier, because when you pay that, when somebody like Anthony Pratt plays that close attention to the seemingly smallest detail, who is not going to do that? I don't care if you're a producer, director, editor, PA. You are going to give your best. If someone like that is, and he's done his best, you better do it as well. That's what Dick Winters would say. So that's intentional. That level of that striving for authenticity. Chair.
Jimmy, Ross, I had the pleasure of traveling with you all on our first Easy Company tour. Do you have any comments about those? Not necessarily our tours, but your walking over that ground, visiting the cemeteries.
You sure this ain't a plant? You sure?
It's about to be.
Yeah. No, listen, it took my breath away. Jim and I have talked about this for a while. Since 2017, we started helping out with the museum. They came to us with an idea, actually through Mike Cudlitz, and Mike then, spoke to us, and between the three of us, we said, yeah, this could be a fun idea. Let's go try it out. And we follow the footsteps of Easy Company from the UK all the way to Austria. It blows my mind. I think, echoing what Kirk just said, when I first saw the Crossroads, it was like I was back on the Hatfield set. Same thing as the Bojacs, couldn't believe it. So, Mr. Pratt, incredible work. Normandy, there's a lot of hedgerows, so I understand why we did that in the UK. But yeah, I mean, it's every time I've set foot in the places where the real men were, it's identical to the show. So kudos.
Jim?
Yeah, I mean, I echo what you guys said. Just going on tour and seeing the sites, and I mean all of them, from the foxholes to the arches in Hagenau. I mean, just wonderful. And we had the grand opportunity to go back with Brad Freeman with the museum and retrace the footsteps of Easy Company with an actual Easy Company veteran. And that was incredibly impactful, going back to the places and watching Brad just re-see some of it and the information that he gave us. Just torn with the museum in general, and following the foot of Easy Company. As many times as I've done it, it doesn't get old. You learn something every single time, and to just watch and hear and listen and be affected by how the American soldier is celebrated in each part of the journey, it's pretty rewarding, and it's humbling. So yeah.
Chair?
Ivan, you had stopped by Terry's table last night at dinner, and you told our table a little story about the set. Not the actual sites, but the set, and I found it pretty fascinating. Can you share that with the audience? Because you were responsible for sort of getting that big plot of land. Well, the whole set, the RAF.
Hatfield.
There you go. It's you.
Can you hear me now? So in order to shoot in the UK, we had to convince HBO this was a good idea. Even though Saving Private Ryan had shot there previously, it wasn't a given. Tony had told me to go find alternatives, so we started out in Ireland, and we went to the Czech Republic and Germany, and I'll be honest with you, Tony never wanted to shoot in any of those other countries at all, but I got to see Europe for free, so it worked for me. spent a lot of time, drank a lot of beer, and we ended up in Hatfield, but we had to negotiate the deal to shoot there, and they didn't want to. It was HBO, and they didn't want to pay the same price as. We wanted to put as much of this on the screen and give Tony Pratt all the money he needed to build the set. So we had to get the land pretty much for free. And so we ended up paying a nominal fee for 2 years in Hatfield, which was a disused military base. And then we ended up shooting, we ended up getting the 2 warehouses. We ended up shooting Bastogne in there. We ended up shooting the Eagle's Nest, building the Eagle's Nest. We ended up building Paris in those stages. Very little of the show, I hate to tell everybody this, was shot on location. With Tony Pratt's genius, the river in episode 8 was built. Pretty much everything that you saw besides the concentration camp in Hatfield House and Zelmzee up in Interlaken, actually, was those are the only 3 practical locations in the entire show. The rest of it was all built at Hatfield in just outside of London.
You shared the price. Can you share it publicly?
Sure. We paid £150,000 for the whole entire show, run a show.
Thank you, Ivan. This last question is going to be for the actors specifically. If the real person you portrayed in the series was here today, what is the one thing you would want to say to them or ask them? Let's start with Dexter, please.
If Johnny was here, God, it's like almost an impossible question to answer. I mean, I think we asked them a lot of the questions at the time. I don't know. It's like, how do you feel about your brothers? What do you think of the show? What do you think of how we told your story? I mean, where to begin? It's a really hard question to navigate, that one. But of course, you need to thank them. Hopefully, the show goes some way to showing the reverence and the respect and the gratitude that we all feel as creators. For what they sacrificed and gave. But that's a really hard question.
I got to spend a lot of time with Frank, and I was young, and he passed away. So being a father and a husband now, I think I'd have a lot of different questions for him. Probably none about the war, to be honest. I think I'd ask him advice on how to be a good husband, because he was married for 50, 60 years and was by her side to the very end, and he raised wonderful children and grandchildren he has, so he's had a beautiful family, and navigating that, I'd probably ask him if he would kindly give up his car at 96 years old and stop driving. I'd ask him where he wants to eat. I'd be a friend, because that's kind of what you wanted from these guys. You wanted their friendship, you wanted their trust, That was more important than anything. So yeah, I'd probably ask him some good old fatherhood questions.
Thank you.
Ross?
Oh, wow, yeah, it is a toughie. Of course, the thanks would be the first thing that would come to mind. Thank him for who he was, thank him for his service. I would just hope that we made him proud. I think that's really as far as I can go with it. I think, like Jim's saying, I would perhaps ask it. Joe suffered from PTSD, which a lot of the men did, but it wasn't as vocalized back then as it is now. And he disappeared 2 years after returning from the war, and wouldn't come to any of the reunions. The guys really tried to get in touch with him over the years, and the home phone was hung up by he and Mrs. Liebgott. And so I would check in on him. Hope you're doing okay, sir. But I would, undoubtedly just hope that we did him proud.
Shane?
I'd have to say that I'd have to ask him, I'd have to ask Ro how he didn't get more than just one minor leg wound throughout the entire time he was in the war, you know, running around out there. It's miraculous to me. And so that would probably be my first question. How are you even here?
Rick?
Oh, man, these questions are so hard to answer. And I had the most time to think about it, except for Frank, who gets a little bit more time than me. You got to be thinking, buddy. George passed away a few years before we started shooting. So whether it's a single question or just being able to have an alternate universe where he could experience some part of this, I would just love to see what he thought. I would have loved to have known what he thought of all of this. And I would love to hear a story that maybe got told from his perspective with the other guys about this while it was happening. But I did get a chance to, we did get really close with the guys that were with us, and we hold all of those stories. Those stories become our stories. We tell stories like we're them. So, yeah.
Because I was fortunate enough to have Bill live so long, and I knew how he felt about everything. There was nothing left unsaid between us. But the impact he had on me, on the kind of man I became, I would love to pick his brain about he was a great grandfather, and I've just become a grandfather, and I know he could teach me a lot about that, and I'd really pick his brain. He still has stuff to teach me.
Jerry, I'm gonna just chime in with that too. I've never thought of this, guys, but I wonder, since they're all gone, there's nobody from Easy Company left yet. So I like to imagine, as they had a reunion every year from 1947, they're having them still now, where they are, and I wonder what they thought, what they have thought, what they think of our show.
Could I just add one thing on Major Winter's behalf? Listening to everybody answer that particular question, and obviously I'm not Damien, and my relationship with Winters was so deeply personal, and so I'm asking myself, what question would I ask him? And this comes back to your intro about, Winters and I spoke often about his understanding of why the men who came back from the war fell silent and couldn't speak about what had happened. And we were very conscious of the fact that we were all collaborating together, veterans, the actors, the writers, every aspect of production, in this unique event to perhaps provide the frame of reference that all of these fellows in World War II didn't have. That Saving Private Ryan had sort of cracked open the door, and then we kicked it down and told this enormous story and provided so many gentlemen with that frame of reference just in time for them to be able to open up to their families and talk about it. And so I guess I would ask him, did we pull it off? Are you satisfied?
That's what they're talking about at the reunion, man, I'm telling you.
Absolutely, yeah.
They're talking about that very thing.
Great.
Jer?
Well, I had the pleasure of being here at the museum's premiere and the post party, and the one thing I remember most, Michael, you were there, sir, Ron Livingston, I remember Bill Guarnere dancing with his crutches, without his leg, but with his crutches, dancing with every young woman there. And ever since watching this about 284 times, I actually picture Frank doing it. But I think that's a testament to everybody behind the scenes, everybody that got us to that point. Ladies, everybody, writers, directors, producers, the casting, boy, these are those men, and thank you very much for what you did. Thanks to everyone on this panel for what you've done, and thank you for getting this wonderful evening off to a great start. Round of applause for all of our panelists.
Thank you.
Now, before everyone starts leaving, let's have as much of applause as you'd like, but before everyone leaves, we're going to ask the panelists to exit the stage. Ross McCall is going to have a couple important announcements, and we're going to ask the panelists to exit that way, please. Ross, could you please kick me away from the podium?
Yeah. Hi, folks. Thanks for sticking around. Weren't they great? Aren't they great? My boys, my girls. Wow. I feel so regal up here with like the box here. It's a bit different. So we're going to do something a little bit different. I'll be very quick, I promise you. It's been mentioned tonight many times, and I'm sure it was mentioned earlier. How comes Band of Brothers is still being talked about all this time later? 25 years later, we're still banging on about it. Why? Well, we've kind of covered a little bit of that tonight. We had the best of the best. And we're talking about our amazing producers, our amazing writers, our amazing directors, our amazing cast, our amazing casting directors, our amazing customers, makeup, the list goes on and on and on. We had the best of the best, except probably the English catering. That was the one thing that I think we probably could have done better. But apart from that, everything was top notch, so well done. For us actors, if you were to ask us, what really helped us become Easy Company? We would probably boil that down to maybe 5 or so folks, in no particular order. There was Mr. Hanks, Mr. Spielberg. We had Mademoiselle Meg Liberman, of course, and that extends to the casting family, of course, Angela, Suzanne. Mr. Tony Toe, who you just saw up on the stage here. Tony was, yeah, please, yeah, absolutely, yeah. Tony was our boots on the ground producer. And what I mean by that was he sailed this ship from start to finish. He was instrumental in the show on how it became. He was instrumental in us being there. He was like I think my third audition. I auditioned for Tom before I auditioned for Tony. That's how important he is. And then the last person, last but not least, is a fella that we've all come to love. This man was probably the first person out of production who got in touch with the actors. We were all mailed a letter to our houses that was hand-typed 1942. And it was welcoming us to an experience that we're about to undertake that was unlike any other. It was getting us ready. It was getting us ready to go on this adventure. And we were being invited to a thing called boot camp. Now, I wouldn't dare insult any of our military fine folks in the audience or who are live streaming with us. I'm not saying we did your basic, but we did a version of basic that was the toughest thing I've ever done in my life, but arguably the greatest. And I would like to think most of the men would echo that sentiment. Within this letter that came to our homes, there was a few instructions, not much. Random things, like we could only bring reading material that was of religious reading matter. We could bring a pencil, piece of paper. That was so that we could write love heart poems to our sweethearts back at home. We got told to bring a towel, army green. We were told that we could bring gym attire, so we'd have our sneakers, our hoodies, our sweats. But the rest of the time, we were gonna be in our military gear from the 1940s. Now, when we all got fitted in our wardrobe for Band of Brothers, boy, did we think we were the bee's knees. We looked sharp, we had helmets on, we had the jackets on, we thought we were the business. I've since seen Polaroid pictures of us when we had those uniforms, and we did not look the business. In fact, I looked like I was wearing my father's uniform at one point. So these uniforms, we knew, didn't fit us quite yet. And they certainly weren't going to shrink to us. We had to fill ourselves out to get into those uniforms. We embarked on a journey. We were told that this boot camp was going to be tough. Get ready. Suck it up. We went, a lot of people will talk about boot camp. Some people will say it's 3 weeks. Some people say it's 4 days. The truth is it was around 10, I believe. And those 10 days, like I said, were grueling. We were yelled at more than any human beings have ever been yelled at. And we sort of lapped it up and loved it. Every single man that went to boot camp took it so seriously. They understood the legacy that we were trying to show the world. We understood this story that was going to be on our shoulders. The man running this boot camp, he came with a reputation, a real reputation. But he and his cadre, they taught us everything. They taught us how to become men. They taught us how to march. They taught us how to drill, how to outflank an enemy. They taught us how to salute, how to be, how to walk, how to talk like Easy Company. We broke in Corcoran's with them. We learned how to throw hand grenades. I could strip an M1 rifle down in 2.5 minutes and put it back together again. Do not ask me to do it today. There's not a chance I would know how. But we figured it out under the guidance of this fella. I had a special relationship with him. He loved all his boys. He really did. And he knew what made each one of us tick. He knew what would break us down, and he knew how to pull us back up again. He started calling me a name that I hadn't heard before. Everyone on the show called me Lieb or Liebgott. I started getting called Bolt. I had no idea what Bolt was. And somebody told me who Bolt was, and Bolt was actually someone who was very important to him in his life. He was called Bolt because he kept the company together. Now, I am under no pretense that was me at all. All the men did their duty, and everybody held their own on this show. I was a little cheeky back then. Go figure. I used to get away with murder with this man. When he was yelling out orders or, chewing someone to pieces, I would make some stupid, dry comment. And kind of like my dad, he had a little smile because he knew there was no malice. He knew I was there to do a job, and he knew I took it really, really seriously, as did all the men. So that moniker I was happy to stick with. I'm still called Bolt to this day. And I love him for it. Boot camp was the reason that this show became what it became. I also just recently found out that they had to pitch the network, boot camp. They had to go in and say, listen, we want to take these guys away. And the network barked at it. They said, no way. It's going to cost too much money. This is a crazy idea. He went in, repitched it with the higher-ups, and got them to agree to this boot camp. We came out of boot camp marching as Easy Company. It's the greatest honor of all our lives. Kirk was asking earlier, what do you come out of this show? It was the greatest thing any of us have ever done and the proudest thing that we've ever done. 3 tours in Vietnam for the U.S. Marine Corps. 31 major combat operations. 3 Purple Hearts. When this man stopped serving for the country, he decided to embark on a new career and make the entertainment world know what it's like to serve in the military. He's done everything that you've seen that's worth anything. Saving Private Ryan, Platoon, The Pacific, Masters of the Air, and a little show called Band of Brothers. In a writer's words that are more wiser than I, oh Captain, my friend, Cam Deldai. So our friends at the museum who we've partnered with over these years, they very gracefully allowed us to give this to Cap. And listen, he's not just getting a frame with a piece of paper. It's something a little more, a little more interesting. He's getting a paver. And on this paver, it's going to remain here until the end of time. So he's going to be immortalized in the only way that we could show how, just to show how much we love him. And we are actually going to show a little video from someone else who kind of digs him as much as we do.
We owe a huge debt to the expertise and the drive of the skipper. United States Marine Corps Captain Dale Dye, retired, who made it his life mission to bring a verisimilitude and truthfulness to Band of Brothers. And for 3 weeks, he instilled in the training program that sense of what it takes in order to be a paratrooper, what it takes, what it took in order to go off and be a part of saving the world. And it wasn't just those 3 weeks. It was an ongoing supervising, an ongoing motivating, an ongoing demand that all of us realize the particular task before us. we were going to be embodying not just a time, but an ethos, not just of the warrior, but of the liberator. And were it not for Dale Dye, I do not think we would be here celebrating exactly in the same way we are tonight. So find the skipper, give him a quick salute, no more than that, but give him the acknowledgement that were it not for him, Band of Brothers might not have been Band of Brothers.
Well, for once in my miserable, misbegotten life, I'm speechless. But what Bolt told you is the truth. What I learned and what I brought, I think, to every production I've worked on is one principle of leadership. You have to love them to lead them. And I love them.